Ever since we saw the original reveal of Spore, our minds were blown. The graphics were amazing. You could choose to stay underwater or choose to move onto land, and it truly seemed like magic. What we actually got was less than what was promised. Ever since then, many have hoped for a sequel or spiritual successor, but will any of these new games come close to what we really want? Let's find out, and welcome to new games you can play in 2024 that are like Spore. How about Elysian Eclipse? This is a sandbox evolution simulator which lets you evolve from an amoeba into a space-traveling sentient being. You create your own creatures, buildings, and vehicles to conquer procedural planets and turn the galaxy into your personal playground. This sounds like an intended spiritual successor for Spore, for sure. But Spore is such a huge thing to live up to. Even though Spore itself sort of didn't exactly end up what it was supposed to be, the expectations to surpass Spore with a new game are immense. This one brings you through all the expected phases: cell, aquatic, creature, tribal, medieval, civilization, and finally the space stage. So it's all supposed to be there, but this is going to be a long-term project. It is meant to be going into early access at some point, likely over the next year-ish, but the final release window is supposed to be 2027, so this is going to be one of those independent games which may or may not turn out to be absolutely amazing, but it should become playable soon, and then we'll see how it goes over the following years. If it hits the ground running, this could be something very special, but it might just fall flat as well. But, we'll see how it goes for Elysian Eclipse. For a game that's like the cell stage in Spore, Lifeforms Binary Fission. Here you play as a microorganism and bump into things in this arcade-like survival sandbox simulation. Choose which traits to strengthen and abilities to gain as you multiply and gain ecological dominance. And there will also be other evolving species in survival mode, or you could experiment with sandbox controls. Now, many of these games are sort of focusing on just one aspect of Spore, whether it's the cell stage or the creature stage, and I do know many love the cell stage by itself, so maybe this one is for you. You find food to sustain and grow your life form. You'll be choosing mutations as you start to grow. And of course, you have to compete and destroy other life forms and eat their nutrients. Just break them apart and take what's inside. Eventually taking over the environment. Maybe it's a bit arcadey, but if you're not sure at the time of making this video, there is a free demo you can try. And Lifeforms Binary Fission is set to release Q1 2024, so you can try the free demo now, and it shouldn't be too long before we can play the full version of this game. Focusing down onto a smaller set of phases, Adapt. To survive, you must guide your species through a constantly changing world, compete with strange creatures for food and territory, and find your niche through careful evolutionary choices. The real question is not if you can survive, but for how long. So it is saying, pretty much as natural selection goes, every species comes to an end, unless I guess you're a shark. So Adapt is a survival evolution game. With a constantly changing environment, you are meant to create your creature and iterate on its design, and try to survive and thrive in the ecosystem. With the numerous adaptations, you're supposed to have diverse playstyles, and plant life will exhibit seasonal behaviors and growth. So you don't get seeds and fruits all seasons, which is gonna make things kinda complicated for you to survive. You can hunt or be hunted, and overall this seems like a nice creature designer's survival kind of simulation. So although this is not the entire spectrum of Spore's phases from, the amoeba into space, this does sort of focus on the creature aspect, and I think that actually kind of taps into what a lot of people are looking for. A lot of people played Spore and they just preferred the single cell phase up until the creature phase and maybe the tribal phase, but A lot of people sort of didn't like it when it went into the civilization and space phase, so maybe Adapt is sort of going into the more appropriate direction and focusing on what people loved most about Spore and leaving out the rest. Having said that, this does have a sort of a more cartoony look, which may or may not appeal to you. But I think if you don't like it, and you can just ignore the visual style for now, this might be something very interesting. At the time of recording, there isn't too much to say about it, because we've only seen so much, and there's no particular release window, it's just coming soon, though I do expect we will see a lot more of Adapt moving forward. Hey, now that you're a bit into the list, I'm sure you're enjoying it, so it would be greatly appreciated if you can like the video. Alright, next game. For another one that's focusing on the cell stage of Spore, Sipho. Here is what's calling itself an action survival game with an intricate building system. You grow your creature and take over the local ecosystem as you fight, grow, survive, and dominate. There's an adventure mode and a sandbox mode. This one is a bit more like those building games where you piece together many small parts into a larger creature, so there's plenty of creature customization, you can choose your own playstyle with 6 different species throughout the game, there's infinite worlds to live in, there are cunning bosses for you to beat, and there's even a new game plus. So maybe this one is less of a simulation game and more of an arcadey fighter-shooter thing, but it is still very much seemingly inspired by the cell stage of Spore. Now the good news is that it's received few but very positive reviews on Steam, and it's actually released. It released towards the end of 2023, so it's out now, and it's been receiving some updates since then, but overall, I think if you are looking at it and it seems intriguing, you can get your microscope and have a closer look at Sipho. Thrive. We are continuing the Spore theme, and this one is an evolution simulation game. You take control of your species in the environment and edit your species as a whole. Compete with other evolving species for resources on an alien planet. Through this game, you will be controlling an individual member of your species as you hunt and be hunted and scavenge for resources. You get to edit your species to make it more successful over time. You explore different biomes, fight other cells and multicellular beings. You learn about biology by using real compounds. So this is an evolution game where it's sort of backed up by actual science, and you spread your species across the planet via the biomap. So for the Spore spiritual successors, this one is kind of leaning more to the scientific approach to natural selection and evolution. Now, this one has had some time to prove itself. It's been in early access since the end of 2021, so it's been a couple years playable at this point, and it's been getting regular-ish updates over the years, and at the time of recording, it's received a good few hundred user reviews on Steam with 90+% positive. So overall, people are liking this one, but it is sort of taking its time through early access. I mean, in the approximately how long will this game be in early access, the developer actually says it could take up to 150 months. We're talking a 12-year development cycle. So hey, just another decade to go for Thrive to fully release, but you know, it's playable now, so you can look it up, you can see what it is, and it's not exactly an expensive game. It's an indie development, so that's why it's taking a long time, and it's not the only indie development to take 10 years to finally reach 1.0 release. So if you're intrigued about Thrive, you can look it up, see if you want to jump in now, or you know, you could just check back at any point in the future and see how it's doing. And then we have the Sapling. This is a short simulation game where you design your own plants and animals, and you put them in a world together and see how the simulation plays out. You could also turn on random mutations and see what evolution does to your ecosystem. So this is a Spore-like game where you're more in control of the entire environment, but also you can sort of let the game do what it wants and let random mutations and natural selection kind of figure out what it's gonna do. So you could let the simulation run and find yourself with very interesting and different scenarios. This one also allows you to design algae and plants, so it's not just the animals and creatures you're designing here, and I think this is the only game that sort of allows you to do that, where you can design the plants and really have full control over the entire ecosystem. But also, you know, this is more of an indie development, so it has been in early access for a while now, since the end of 2019. So it's been multiple years that this has been in early access, so it's not exactly a new game, but I wanted to tell you about it in this list anyway because, you know, we're looking at spiritual successors to God games and stuff like that, so the Sapling is one of them. Having been in early access for that long, it's received multiple hundreds of user reviews on Steam, with 90% plus positive, so people are also enjoying this one. Though there is no particular release window or estimate for how long this game will be in early access, so it's just gonna be another one of those indie ongoing developments, which may be interesting for you to keep an eye on. Okay, then I want to mention CreatureSim. This one is very indie. It's not even on Steam or anything. There's just an own independent kind of website thing, and it's sort of like a Spore-ish kind of game. But you know, this is very indie, very few updates coming for this game, but it does look kinda interesting, and maybe one day CreatureSim will turn out to be something kind of interesting. I just want to put it on your radar, but I also want to say that you don't have to keep too close an eye on this one because it's, you know, it's under development for a long time and it may or may not release. It might just end at some point or go silent forever, but it is a game out there that I want to mention because it is a Spore spiritual successor by another indie developer, but you know, that's about it for CreatureSim, so let's move on to another kind of god game. With more evolution, but more on the environment, it's Ecosystem. Grow and modify an ecosystem with simulated evolution by natural selection, creating the life forms that inhabit it. All the creatures that you see in the footage you're seeing right now supposedly evolved on their own in-game. None of them were hand-edited, so that means that this is really sort of focusing on the evolution simulation, natural selection kind of process, where you could get some very crazy things that eventually turn out to be very successful creatures, because the non-successful creatures would just die out. So the creatures here have a kind of synthetic DNA system, and it's all simulated, including the creature's brains and nervous systems and DNA and all of that. Even the muscles and how the creatures physically move around are bound by the laws of physics. So this is very interesting in terms of a god game where you can kind of just watch what the simulation comes up with, and you could end up with very cool or just very bizarre things. It sounds like it could be a cool time. Now, this game has been in early access since 2021, with a few hundred very positive reviews so far on Steam. So it's been a while and it's not super popular, but it was supposed to be in early access for about a year and a half. So we're kind of past that date right now, but it should mean that it's getting closer and closer to becoming more complete. But it also means you can jump in right now if you just want to mess around with this ecosystem. This sort of feels more like a simulation rather than a game. But yeah, it's interesting. Now for one that I can't believe I'm still talking about as an upcoming game, it is the Universim. This is a game that's been in development for 10 years, and it's kind of like Spore, but only the tribal phase onwards. You develop your civilization into a sprawling global civilization, and eventually you take to the stars to colonize the rest of the galaxy, but you will find obstacles lying in your way. So this game has been going for a long time. I've talked about it multiple times before. It's been in early access since 2018, and we've been talking about it since even before then. And it had a rough start. It was very bare bones at the start of early access, and there were a lot of things that were just not quite there. I actually have some videos on the Universim. Over the years, this has begun to develop into something very big and quite well liked. It's received thousands of user reviews on Steam, with 80+% positive, so that's still relatively good. And I do know Steam user reviews aren't a perfect indicator for how good or bad a game is, but it's an indicator. And in this game, you are a god, guiding a species and sort of not really direct control, but also kind of have quite a bit of direct control, but you sort of guide your civilization along its path. And it has sort of that slight good and evil approach as you go through the ages from the ancient Stone Age into the future Space Age. Because this has been in early access for so long, there's a lot of information about the Universim, and I don't think I have to spend too much talking about it. However, the Universim just promised a full 1.0 release on the 22nd of January 2024. That means the Universim, finally, after a decade, is going to be a released game. After so long, many of you have probably been waiting for this game to release or just sort of forgot about it. So now might be a good time to keep an eye on it and see if you want to jump back in or jump in for the first time if you've been waiting for full release. And finally, by all accounts, the Universim is no longer an upcoming game. There you have it. Press the like button and get games using the GOG referral link below to support videos like this one. Click the link and buy any game, it really helps. Also, thank you to all the patrons and YouTube members who really support this channel and keeping videos like these being made. Join if you want your name on future videos. If you want to stay in the know for another genre, go to the next list video linked on screen, as I'm sure Spore fans like yourself would not want to miss all the other simulation and god games in the other lists. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you there.